Welcome to this evening's performance of Film Theory. Before we begin tonight's presentation, we kindly ask that you take the time now to unwrap any candies you may have, because that's a thing that apparently annoys some people. Tonight's performance will include a short intermission, provided brands care enough about this channel to spend money on a mid-roll ad. Now please, turn off your cell phones and... Oh, wait, most of you are probably watching on cell phones. Don't do that! Don't turn off your cell phones! Keep your cell phones loud and active! Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where today it's probably more accurate to call the show Film Theatrical Presentation Sent to Direct Digital Release Theory, since we're talking about the Broadway musical turned Disney cash cow, Hamilton. When it comes to talking about Broadway musicals, well, usually it'd be outside the realm of my channels, which is a shame, since as many of you know, I was in a past life a touring actor and director. But since a filmed version of Hamilton just came out to near universal praise on Disney+, looks like I finally have an excuse to talk about it, and let's just say, I am not throwing away my shot. Oh, and if you're already tired of these puns from the show, I've got some bad news, because never gonna be satisfied. Oh, and for those of you who haven't seen the musical or the Disney+ version yet, this will be a mostly spoiler-free theory. Don't worry, I won't go ruining anything big, like telling you who wins the American Revolutionary War. You'll just have to watch it for yourself and find out what happens to that young, scrappy, and hungry country. But rather than talking about how dangerous it was to shoot a flintlock pistol straight into the air, or go through the bizarre economics that explains why King George III was probably right, I'm doing something a little bit different today. I'm gonna try to get Hamilton qualified for the Academy Awards. Maybe not so far as a nomination, and certainly not a win, although that would be great. Today, we're starting smaller. We're just trying to get Hamilton its shot at taking home its very own Oscar. But to truly understand what I'm talking about, why it matters, and how today we might be able to single-handedly change the entire face of cinema as we know it, that's barely an exaggeration, by the way, we first have to rewind. For those of you who don't know, Hamilton, a musical about the life of founding father to the U.S. Alexander Hamilton, started its Broadway run back in 2015. The next year, the original cast recorded 2 live performances and then a third performance specifically for cameras. The rights to distribute the resulting movie went up for sale and were snagged by Disney, who decided to lock Hamilton in the good old Disney vault until 2021. But after everyone got themselves locked inside this year, Disney decided that, well, they had this complete movie anyway, may as well release it to get everyone hooked on Disney+. And it is great. I mean, it was a fantastic stage show to begin with, and they filmed it, so, you know, it's a great recording of what is a phenomenal live stage production. Anyway, this has prompted many Hamil fans to ask the question, could this filmed production of Hamilton actually be nominated for, and heck, even win, an Oscar? Because let's be honest, the field this year is looking pretty thin, with many films being indefinitely delayed. In order to get to 10 films in the current 2020 Best Picture lineup, you're looking at something like Sonic the Hedgehog, Bad Boys for Life, Trolls World Tour, Onward, Birds of Prey, Call of the Wild, Doolittle, Scoob, Artemis Fowl, and Impractical Jokers the movie. I mean, Hamilton has to edge out at least one of those, right? Now, in a normal year, the fact that Hamilton started on a streaming service would actually disqualify you for the Oscar. Their rules state that a film needs to have debuted in Los Angeles County theaters before or on the same day as being streamed. More specifically from the rule set, quote, a film must have a minimum 7-day theatrical run in a Los Angeles County commercial theater with at least 3 screenings per day for paid admission. Now, that might seem really dumb and super arbitrary, but if you think about it, it does kind of make sense. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the one that gives away the Academy Awards, is built on the idea of preserving the art of movies and the importance of seeing them on a big screen. So, making sure that a film runs in a theater is a big deal for their brand. This year, however, things are different, and due to almost all the theaters being closed down, the Academy has actually decided to allow streaming debuts to qualify. Huzzah! Hooray! All you fans that were worried about the billion-dollar, 11-time Tony Award-winning musical can rest easy now, knowing that it'll get even more money and even more accolades. Or can you actually rest easy? No, you can't. Hamilton is still disqualified. According to an article by Vanity Fair on July 6th, a representative from the Academy said that Hamilton is still not qualified because of a rule stating, quote, works that are essentially promotional or instructional are not eligible, nor are works that are essentially unfiltered records of performances. So, bummer. Theory over, right? Nope. Because I think the Academy's wrong. I think they're interpreting their own rules incorrectly, and moreover, I think they're interpreting what a movie is incorrectly. And today, I'm gonna prove all of it. Because in a year where it's slim pickings for the Academy, I think it might be nice to have Hamilton fans on their side. First, let's look at those Oscar rules, shall we? Well, yes, it is true that there is a rule specifically banning unfiltered records of performances. This rule is specifically for the documentary category, which is decidedly not Hamilton. I know this may come as a surprise, Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, but Hamilton is shockingly not a documentary about the founding of America. I was surprised too, but then I looked around and realized, oh wait, there are no slaves here. But all joking aside, even if this was a wider sweeping rule, Hamilton on Disney Plus is certainly not an unfiltered record. In fact, it is neither unfiltered nor a record. As I mentioned already, the filmed version of Hamilton was shot over the course of 3 different shows. 2 of those shows were in front of an audience, but the 3rd show was done entirely for the camera so they could get those juicy close-ups. Those 3 recordings were then cut together to produce an entirely new work, what we now know as Hamilton, the movie on Disney Plus. It's not the record of any one standalone event that ever happened. Instead, it's a series of takes all edited together to tell a cohesive narrative, just like you do with any other movie in existence. They even ended up with continuity errors as the result of this multi-day shoot. In the song Satisfied, flowers on Angelica's blouse appear and disappear throughout the performance. No flowers? Flowers. No flowers? Flowers. If this truly is unfiltered, then I need to know exactly what substance those flowers are made of so I can make an invisibility cloak and finally steal the Diet Coke secret formula. In short, Hamilton on Disney Plus uses the 2 things that separate movies from stage shows: cinematography and editing. You see, on stage, you can always try to direct your audience's eyes to the things that you want them to see via techniques like lighting and blocking, aka the position and movement of the people and things on stage, but you're not guaranteed of that. Maybe the audience is just really interested in the elaborate backstory that chorus dancer number 3 has concocted for himself back there and chooses to watch him instead. Additionally, at no point can I, as the director of the show, present that audience member with a different view of the events happening on stage. They're either getting the $600 view from Orchestra Center or the student discount view where half the stage is obstructed from side balcony A. But with film, cinematography allows you as the director to manage all of that stuff. I can choose to focus the camera on specific characters or actions and ignore others. I can move the camera to create angles that you would never be able to accomplish on stage. And Hamilton on Disney Plus does exactly that. Thanks to the magic of cinema, we get some amazing shots, like this one of Angelica's face immediately after she introduces Alexander to her sister, giving up her own chance with him. During the story of tonight, the camera makes sure to stay centered around the 4 characters of the gang. By keeping the framing tight, it helps the cinematic audience forget the huge empty stage around the actors, which makes their ideological cries for freedom seem much more important and all-encompassing rather than ringing out to an empty hall. Later, while Thomas Jefferson is gloating that Hamilton's never going to be president, we're treated to a top-down shot. Now, I know seating for Hamilton's limited, but I didn't realize they were putting the audience in the rafters. They even use the camera cuts to enhance punchlines, like the moment King George III finds out who's taken over for George Washington.
John Adams?
Each one is an intentional camera placement or movement that uses the medium of film to change the way that the viewer perceives these scenes relative to the way that they would experience them as the audience in a live theater show. But the other half of this equation is editing. In a live show, you can't go back and erase a flubbed line or choose to redo an emotional beat to make it stronger. But in a film, you can. Editing, choosing what takes to keep and how to best splice them together, that helps tell the story just as much as the actors do when it comes to the art of cinema. And in the filmed recordings of Hamilton, again, they choose to do exactly this. In the song Satisfied, it's taken to an extreme, with rapid cuts from varied angles that keep the viewing audience as off-kilter as the character on stage who's trying to figure out how she feels about everything going on around her. In the song Non-Stop, it's a bit more the opposite. Longer shots with the camera swinging around in wide arcs, pulling ever more characters and action into frame as Hamilton's head spins. And of course, you can't ignore the editing decision to leave every juicy King George appearance intense and extreme close-up. Phew, the first row needs to come with a splash guard warning. So at this point, I think it's pretty clear that Hamilton falls squarely within the rules of a movie that should be qualified for Oscar consideration. Not a guaranteed nomination or anything, but at least worth being considered for one. But let's stop talking about Hamilton specifically and ask the wider question, why is filmed theater being disqualified in the first place? I mean, it used to be valid. Back in 1966, Sir Laurence Olivier scored a Best Actor nomination for his performance of Othello in a filmed stage production. Then again, in 1976, the film Give 'Em Hell, Harry, which was a live theatrical recording of a one-man stage play, was nominated for Best Actor. So why would filming something live on a theatrical stage in one long take inherently disqualify it as an artistic work? I mean, think about it honestly. In the past few years, the Oscar for Best Cinematography has gone to both 1917 and Birdman, two movies that have expressly used longer takes and disguised their edits in order to make it seem like one long continuous shot. And then what about the acting for those sorts of movies? Shooting those sorts of extended takes requires the actors to be in character longer, hitting their marks and being emotionally invested in the scene for longer periods of time. Quite literally the exact same things that theatrical actors are required to do on stage each and every night. Ironically enough, films have been pushing towards and getting rewarded by the Academy for pushing towards more of a live theater aesthetic for the better part of the last decade. So to exclude live theatrical recordings seems both narrow-minded and arbitrary. It also brings up the challenge that you've now set up for yourself. Where do you draw the line? How theatrical is too theatrical? Theater and movie making both require large teams with sets, blocking, hitting marks, memorizing lines, lighting, sound. In filmmaking, sometimes you take the 300th take, but sometimes you take the first take. Is getting it in one take any different from getting one shot at a theatrical performance? Do you see how this quickly becomes a slippery slope movie industry? Case in point, what about the very intense and experimental movie Dogville, starring Nicole Kidman, one of your favorites, and directed by the famous Lars von Trier? It takes place on a black soundstage, with location outlines drawn and labeled on the ground, with props and set dressing all being pantomimed or alluded to via sound effects. It's a film, certainly, but it's using very theatrical conventions. The minimalist style is actually very reminiscent of the theatrical work of famous playwright and director Bertolt Brecht, who tended to use bare staging to focus the audience's attention on the acting and storytelling. By exposing the conventions of the theater, not trying to hide things like lights and sets, his hope was to make viewers constantly aware of the theater's artificiality. Dogville, the movie, plays heavily in this theatrical world, and yet Dogville is still very much a movie, winning numerous awards at film festivals around the world. So again, I ask, how theatrical is too theatrical? Where does the line sit? To me, the only differentiators are cinematography and editing. By those two tokens, you require nominees to be anything that's been put on a camera and displayed on a screen. And why not? Why would you want to limit it to much more than that? If you open the door to Hamilton, so what? What's the risk? That Hollywood suddenly gets shown up by Broadway? Good. People in theater deserve more respect. Many of them are more talented actors and directors than some of the biggest names out there. Yeah, I said it. Sorry, I've wanted to rant about that for years, but this was my only chance to do it. I just think that theater actors get totally trampled on. Anyway, I ask again, what's the risk of opening the door to filmed productions of live theatrical performances? Are theatrical shows gonna be at a disadvantage? Yeah, I just talked about the continuity errors on Angelica's blouse, so you know, Hamilton probably won't be winning any editing awards this year. And from a cinematography angle, yeah, they're using some fun shots, but it's still pretty basic. Could it win for acting though? Sure, why not? It contains some of the best acting that I've seen on a screen all year. And shouldn't that be enough? Theater and filmmaking are cut from the same cloth. They're variations of an art form. And in a year where the slate of potential Oscar nominees ain't looking too great, I'd much rather see Leslie Odom Jr. or Renee Elise Goldsberry get rewarded for their incredible work that they did on film than have to give the win to a blue CGI hedgehog doing the floss. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And scene.